Today we have a showdown of 4 webcams vying for supremacy and your purchase. Let's put these bad boys to the test. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I am Joe Finley, and before we get started with testing all these webcams, we have to decide why are we testing them. And for our purposes today, we are looking for the ideal webcam for a video podcast, and there's no better place to do a video podcast than Riverside. Riverside is your beginning to end podcast solution, from recording your podcast to recording interviews via Riverside calls, to one of the simplest editing processes I've ever seen thanks to AI, and all the way to using that AI to extract clips and actually reframe them all for you so you can repackage them, send them out to your socials, and promote your podcast. And you've done all of that without leaving Riverside. My most recent episode of Miscast Commentary, which is my podcast, we had a hard time getting back into our rhythm because we hadn't recorded together in a little while, so there were a lot of gaps. And with Riverside's editing solution, getting rid of those gaps was so easy. You can do it all in 2 button clicks, and it really tightened up the whole podcast. Then from there, I can actually use the text to edit my video. If I find a line that I didn't want to include in the podcast, I can just highlight it, hit delete, and it is gone. I'm not lying when I tell you it sped up my process at least 5 times. It made it so easy to get through that edit, and it'll work for you too. So go join Riverside for free. You can find my link down below, and if you choose to go with one of the paid plans, use code MISCAST at checkout and you'll save 15%. Now let's get to testing these cameras. Today we are testing 4 webcams against each other, and this was actually at the behest of one of the webcams companies. Our friends at OBSBOT reached out to me and they laid down the gauntlet with their latest PTZ camera, the OBSBOT Tiny Lite. And they said, we want to show people our camera up against other cameras. They are not afraid of a little healthy competition, so that's exactly what we're giving them today. But let's see who the OBSBOT Tiny Lite is facing off against in this test. First up, weighing in at $199.99 US, the 4K 30 camera with 90-degree field of view, Logitech MX Brio. Next up, also weighing in at $199.99 US, also 4K 30 and also 90 degrees field of view, the HyperX Vision S. Next up, coming in at a lean $129.99 US, the 4K 30 newcomer with a 73-degree field of view, the EMEET Smartcam S800. And we've got a secret challenger coming in via archive footage because I had to return the camera, the Insta360 Link. So let's go to our tail of the tape where we're going to look at resolution, sensor size, equivalent focal length, field of view, and special features. So we're going to lay down a few ground rules for this testing. For the testing, we're actually going to leave everything at its default. And the reason that we're going to do that is we can fine tune the crap out of these things and you can really make each one look really good. But then it's really hard for me to gauge how difficult it was to get each individual camera to the right spot for each individual test. So I want to show you what these things can do out of the box and just show you what the simplest camera is in the end. Another thing, because the Insta360 Link is not present here for this exact testing, it wasn't shot in the exact same environment, which makes it really hard to compare directly with the other cameras. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to rank the Insta360 against the other cameras, but I will give my comments at the end of each round. Okay, so the first round, we're looking at color accuracy. And you can see right off the bat that all of them are pretty good right out of the box. The Tiny Lite is a little bright, but the colors are all really there. Look at the eyes. The HyperX Vision S is a little bit more washed out than the other ones. The MX Brio has some more contrast, but the colors are there, at least in the shirt. And the Smartcam is actually looking really good here, not quite as good as the OBSBOT. And the Insta360 Link is very washed out, but that shirt is the correct color. So I say 3 of the 4 cameras that we're ranking here really hit the mark, but very small differences in saturation and exposure made the difference. I think the MX Brio just outmatches the Tiny Lite, and that's only because the saturation makes the shirt a little bit brighter than it actually appears. When you look at the MX Brio, that's exactly right. And I give the S800 third place here because, again, it's a saturation issue, just went the other way. But it's important to note that the Vision S isn't a terrible shot by any means. It's just the fact that compared to these other ones, it just lost out. Now, the Insta360 Link did have really good color accuracy in my tests. It's just out of the box. I found it to be very washed out, and it did require a lot of work to actually get it where I wanted it. So after one round, the Logitech MX Brio is in the lead with 4 points. The OBSBOT Tiny Lite is in the second place with 3 points. The EMEET Smartcam S800 is in third place with 2 points. And the HyperX Vision S is in last place with 1. Next up, we're testing motion. Now, while all of the cameras being tested right now were done at 4K 30, I do want to see how it actually picks up the motion. What kind of blur do you get? Do you get any little jitters or anything like that? Let's have a look. So I'd say the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is pretty typical. It's got a little bit of motion blur for 30 frames a second. It's a little bit of glitching in the hand, especially in that first raise on the HyperX Vision S. A little bit more of a blur on the MX Brio compared to the OBSBOT. And for my money, the S800 has a little bit more trailing in that blur, I can see. And I didn't catch any actual fast motion with the Insta360 Link in my video, so just take that. So I think for this one, if we're going to rate the 4, I'm going to rate the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite at number 1. Now, this is all very close. The difference between 1 and 4 is like just the tiniest little line, but it just felt like a more natural 30 frames per second to me. I'm going to take the MX Brio for second place here. Very similar to the OBSBOT, but just maybe a little bit more blur. And then the difference between 3rd and 4th place is really small. The HyperX Vision S has just this little jitter to it. It's not too bad. And the Smartcam has a little bit more trailing when it comes to the blur. Also not too bad, probably not really noticeable if you're not looking against multiple cameras, but just looking at them right now, I have to decide which one bothers me a little bit less, and I'm gonna say that the Vision S is gonna be my 3rd place, which leaves us with 2 ties because now the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite and Logitech MX Brio are tied at 7 points, and the Vision S and S800 are tied at 3 points. Next up, we're gonna test the cameras in low light conditions, and we're gonna do that under 3 conditions. First, I'm just gonna turn off the lighting in front of me, so we're still gonna have overhead and backlights and just whatever light is coming off the monitor on my face. Then we're going to turn off the overhead lights and see what that looks like. And then finally, we're going to turn off the lamps back there, which is acting as a little bit of backlighting for me. Looking at the Tiny 2, it seems to be the most consistent. It looks perfectly good and actually perfectly usable even without the front lights or the overheads or the backlights. The Vision S looks pretty comparable with just the front lights taken off. Once you've taken off the top lights though, you get a lot of red in the face, and you can see with all the lights off, there's a lot of noise, especially around that shirt. The MX Brio was pretty inconsistent. With the front lights off, it didn't do a good job exposing the face. Once the overheads were off, the auto exposure corrected just a little bit better. Ironically, with all the lights off is when the picture was the cleanest. And then the EMEET Smartcam S800 was pretty consistent across no front lights and no overhead lights. It was pretty good. But then you get kind of a ghoulish green on my face once you turned off all the lights. So I think that this one's pretty easy. I think the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite is head and shoulders above the rest with low light. I'm going to give EMEET second place here because despite the fact that I had the green face with all the lights turned off, that's the least likely scenario. I think a much more likely scenario is having all the lights on in your room, but just nothing in front of your face. And EMEET handled that one better than Logitech or HyperX, in my opinion. I'm going to give HyperX third place because it did a better job than Logitech in correcting the auto exposure when I turned off those front lights, which for me puts the MX Brio in 4th place for this round. So when we look at the standings now, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite starting to get out to a pretty big lead with 11 points. The MX Brio's in second with 8. EMEET's now in 3rd place with 6. And the HyperX is bringing up the rear with 5. Now for the Insta360 Link, I didn't do a specific test in my video for low light. I typically don't on a single camera review, mainly because I always recommend actually getting some light on you. The best camera in the world is not going to be good enough if you're not lighting yourself properly, but a pretty basic webcam can still do really well if you're lit properly. But since I'm comparing cameras against each other, I really want to see how it handles some of its functionality, and the auto exposure is a part of that. Next up, I want to have a look at details. So what I'm going to do is something that I dread. I'm going to zoom in, frame up my face like this, and then see what you can see amidst this landscape. So I'm getting plenty of detail out of the Tiny 2 Lite, but it is doing a little bit of a beauty shot thing for me. The HyperX Vision S, a lot of detail in there, but it's a little shiny and it's a little washed out in some spots. It's actually pretty soft on the MX Brio. I'm not getting some of the details that I got in the others. And this one is actually quite scary. The EMEET is showing every one of my flaws. So frankly, I'm really surprised by what I saw. The EMEET Smartcam S800 actually had really good detail. Such good detail that I am going to bury this video and never look at it again, lest I get a ton of plastic surgery. Then I'm looking between the Tiny 2 Lite and the Vision S, and quite frankly, the Vision S has a little bit more detail. You can see the little red spots on me that actually are there. You can see even my pores a little bit better. And it's not to say that the Tiny 2 Lite isn't detailed, but you can see that it's doing just a little bit more to kind of complement my face, which in any other scenario makes it the winner for this round. But because I'm looking specifically for detail, I'm going going to make that number 3, with the HyperX being number 2. And the MX Brio zoomed in this much actually lost a little bit of detail. You can see little bits of blur around freckles and things like that. And again, we're talking like the difference between a 10 and an 8 between these 4 cameras. It's not like any of them are bad in this category. It's just one's got to be better than the rest and one's got to be worse. So this became a big race at the end, but the final scored round, we have our winner. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite comes out number 1 with 13 points. The EMEET Smartcam S800 comes into second place at the very last minute with 10 points. The Logitech MX Brio has 9 points, and the HyperX Vision S comes in with 8 points. Now, I'm really interested to hear how you would have scored these, so put your scores down in the comments and let me know what you think I got wrong. And while you're down there, why don't you hit the like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when I got new videos coming out. And just for fun right at the end of this, I wanted to have a look at the software for these cameras and just compare them and comment on them. Now, in this case, EMEET does not have a software for their camera. It's a plug and play, which for a lot of people makes that a winner. But the control you have over your camera with some of the other softwares that are available here, really, really special. So let's have a look. So the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite has my favorite software that's got a lot of categories, and it's very user-friendly for creators at any level. HyperX's Ingenuity software was nice to have everything on one page, but it was really clunky and really ugly compared to the other ones. The MX Brio has different software solutions for the same device, but utilizing the G Hub was very similar to using OBSBOT's software, just not quite as refined. But Insta360 software is probably the one you want to use if you're a little bit more knowledgeable in cameras and a little less interested in filters and things like that. But there you have it. If you are searching for a webcam right now, you've got some very good options there. I think the OBSBOT Tiny 2 Lite, in terms of quality, in terms of feature set, in terms of value, it's just the winner across all of those right now, at least amongst the cameras that I've tested here. But don't sleep on the EMEET Smartcam S800 either, because it was quite a bit cheaper than the other ones and had really great quality, and it was super simple to use. The MX Brio is a quality camera. I talked a lot about it in this video here. I think it just got slightly beat out in a couple of key categories, and the fact that it's a bit more of an expensive camera makes a difference. And the HyperX Vision S being an older camera and a bit of a reskin of a different webcam makes it, I don't know, it's still a good camera, but just not quite there with the other ones. But that's where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to remind you to go to Riverside, use my link and code down below. You can join for free, but if you do make a purchase using my code, will get you 15% off. And it just lets my friends over at Riverside know that Joe sent you. So make sure after you get the webcam of your voice, you load that up on Riverside and get your video podcast going. And until next time, my friends, let's get to work.